Very warm welcome, everybody. You're home at tennis. Brett Phillips back with you in the studio tonight after a couple of weeks in the desert. Beautiful Indian Wells in Southern California. Love to take your calls again tonight after a little hiatus in that area. 1300 736 736. Your texts are very welcome tonight. 0433 98 11 16. Thanks to Tennis Direct, Australia's favourite online tennis store. They've got fast delivery, magnificent prices, free delivery on orders over $150. Go shopping tonight while you're listening. Tennisdirect.com.au. Use that code FIRSTSERVE10. Get a nice little discount as well. On the B-Solar menu tonight, the latest on court. Chris Cachel to reflect on his 50 years in tennis and his mighty contribution. And Graham Woofer Charlton a little bit later on. But firstly, my first opportunity on this show to pay tribute to Ash Barty since her retirement announcement last Wednesday. Quite simply, Ash, thank you. You played tennis in a way that made me never want to miss a match as a commentator or as a spectator. Almost salivating right now, actually. That backhand slice, the chip return, the whip forehand cross court, the clutch serves just when you needed a free point. Authentic, humble, genuine, but always being you, doing it your way. And I'll never forget you saying that tennis won't totally define me. Whilst I didn't expect your exit to come quite now, it was never going to surprise me and others if you walked away earlier than expected. How fortunate was I, in my one trip thus far to Roland Garros 2019, that you win the whole thing. Your first Grand Slam. And after each of your 7 matches that year in Paris, you granted me a one-on-one interview on the back of your press conferences. And we were able to call that final at the last minute back to SEN, and that came off my mobile phone. I'll never forget it. It's been a pleasure as a tennis broadcaster, and your win at this year's Australian Open will go down as my favourite ever live sporting call for the history you created and the drought that you broke, and the power of radio to have so many tuned in around the world conversing with us, writing every single shot. We'll never forget it. Look forward to seeing what the next chapter brings. If you want to share a highlight, a thought, some memories of Ash Barty tonight, you're certainly welcome, as we've had this opportunity on this show post her announcement last Wednesday. 1300 736 736. Just before we get into what has been happening in Miami, Justin in Coburg has joined us on the line to have a little bit of a chat with us tonight, just to reflect on Ash. Justin, I think we've got you there. Welcome to the show.
How are you, man? Long time no hear. I haven't spoken to you for a while.
Good to have you on board.
Yeah, no, I've just been doing some home renovation, so I just sort of take the time and have a chat about Ash Barty.
What's the first thing that sort of comes to your mind with Ash and her retirement? But when you close your eyes and you think of Ash Barty, what do you think of, Justin?
Her winning the Australian Open.
It's a great way to go out, isn't it? I mean, not many sports people get to go out on the highest of highs. Some play probably too long because they don't want to walk away from their passion, their sport. But that is just, I mean, that night I will never forget. I'll never forget the text machine that night and the power of radio. We had people all over the world listening in. I'll never forget the truck driver who was between Cootamundra and Hay in New South Wales. He had to pull over because his hands were shaking trying to get Ash to the finish line. And, yeah, it's the perfect way to go out. She didn't totally padlock the door last week. We know retirement can be a loose word in sport, so who knows? I think those competitive juices will always be in Ash, but if it's not tennis, there'll be another chapter, I feel, as far as sport is concerned. Let's get to the on-court action. Miami Open, that's the focus right now on the back of Indian Wells. Today it was the special Ks, both advancing to the 4th round. Nick Kyrgios first, 6-2, 6-4 over the Italian Fabio Fognini. Nick Kyrgios, courtside, just after he won today against Fabio. We love Fabio. I tried to get him to an on-court interview in Sydney about 3 years ago, and he walked off court. And they had to go and say, Fabio, you've got some commitments here. And he casually walked over. He had a new kit on to start 2022. He can do anything on a tennis court. He can look like he has no interest in being there. And then all of a sudden he just gets going, and his skill execution, we know the Italians are just born to play tennis, and right now they are certainly dominating, but Fabio is sort of the veteran in the pack of some of the young Italians at the moment. So Kyrgios to play. Yannick Sinner, speaking of Italians, I was supposed to meet at Indian Wells. Sinner pulled out with illness, so we get to have a look at that, which will be fantastic. And Kokkinakis today had to see off a pretty dogged Dennis Kudla. who's predominantly played on the challenges, gets his opportunity at various times to play on the ATP Tour, but Kokonakis really solid today, plays Alexander Zverev next, so that'll be a big step up. But he's going nicely, Thanasi. He's putting together some pretty good tennis at the moment. So they got the walkover today in the doubles, so they're through to the quarterfinals, and they could certainly win the whole thing. I wanted to give Daria Saville a shout out. As I mentioned on the shows from Indian Wells the last 3 weeks, I was able to catch up with Dasha a couple of times. She's gone from 400 to 160 in the space of 3 weeks, and that ranking is going to continue to come down. We know she's a top 100 player. She's brought the level back. The wheels are certainly moving for her. She's got Bronzetti next, who was absolutely a deer in headlights against Ash Barty. I think it was second round of the AO this year as Ash basically decimated everyone on the way to the final. So that's a huge opportunity for Asher to win that match, and possibly Belinda Bencic in the next round. And tomorrow, Alex de Minaur to play Stefanos Tsitsipas, so we know that's going to be a challenge. But gee, I'd love to see de Minaur and Alcaraz go head to head. I mean, I can't sing the praises of the young Spaniard enough. He is just destined for the top of the sport. We've been saying that the last few weeks. De Minaur, though, big challenge to get past Tsitsipas, and Alcaraz to play Marin Cilic. Fritz is still in the draw after a good Indian Wells. Brooksby, Medvedev. So Miami is just getting into full swing, really heating up at Hard Rock Stadium there in Miami. And we'll keep across that on our socials, on our website. Keep an eye on all the daily news, thefirstserve.com.au, and also Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. I do need to mention Rinky Hijikata. Great win for Rinky today. We spoke to him on the first serve last week. So back-to-back wins in California. His seventh ITF title. He's 23-7 win-loss this year. He's up to a career-high 258. I watched his last 3 matches of this particular tournament. I mean, he brings really good sound fundamentals out on the tennis court. He competes. He's got some real passion, and he hates to lose. I mean, he's got all the DNA that we love in a tennis player. You know, we think about John Millman over the years. We think about the way de Minaur goes about it. We think about the way Jordan Thompson goes about it. They all compete and try and get the absolute best out of themselves, and that's all you can ask. And everyone's blessed with a different skill set. But I like Rinky. I like what he's doing. He's had a stint in college. I spoke to him at the juniors at the US Open about 3 years ago, and you could just see in the young man's eyes that he was destined for better things. So great win for him, back-to-back, and hopefully in the next few months can crack the top 200. And Olivia Gadecki, I need to mention her before we go to the break. So she's had 3 finals this year. We know she didn't play in January because she didn't want to be vaccinated. But since the start of Feb, she's put together some pretty good results. I think she's 16-5. She's made 3 finals. She's inside the top 200 for the first time. Hasn't quite been able to get over the line in some of those finals, but her trajectory is certainly on the right path. So plenty of tennis news around. Canberra this week hosting another 25K for the men, 60K for the women before our Aussies will start to spread overseas. So life on tour thanks to AATC, Australasian Academy of Tennis Coaches, providing quality coach education across the globe. Courses delivered by industry leaders and tennis business owners. Learn locally, coach globally, internationally endorsed. Inquire and enrol at aatc.tennis. Chris Cachel. Next, he's my special guest in the studio. Back in the studio tonight, if we're going to preview Sinner and Kyrgios, there's only one man to go to. Johnny in Kensington. Come in, John. Welcome.
Hey, Miss, how are you, buddy?
I'm going
Listen,
well.
mate,
Set it up for me.
All right. Look, I was in a very dark place 2 weeks ago, mate. I had COVID, but my one reassuring thing was I was watching Juve play Villarreal, and in Turin, and they went down. I thought, well, at least I've got to watch Sinner and Kyrgios play. And then I looked at the screen, and Sinner had pulled out, so I had a really bad day. But I was watching them, and it's so nice to talk about Nick in the right way for once. You know, he's been playing unbelievable. And to watch Sinner this morning, I don't know if you watched that match. I had the pleasure of watching that.
Thanks, Buster.
That was
it
just
was good.
utterly unbelievable. You know, saving 5 match points. I thought he was going at all money. 5-2 in the third. I thought there's no coming back here. And to come back the way he did, because I knew he had to play. I knew Fabio, but I love Fabio. I knew Fabio. But, you know, this morning watching Fabio and Nick, it was just, they just really treated each other really well. You know, I thought that there was a lot of respect there, you know, but they're both the same sort of player.
I found it pretty entertaining. Who wins, John? Sinner, Kyrgios? Who wins it?
Look, I think the way Sinner's playing and the way Nick's playing, it's very hard to pick, mate. But I just think the consistency of Sinner, mate. I know I'm biased, but I just think he'll be too consistent for him, you know. And I think he's very cool. Unlike Rublev, he got rattled, mate.
Yeah,
but Sinner, he's just very
good on
cool
you, Johnny.
to do what he did this morning.
Yeah, beautiful. Looking forward to it. Hey, let's dissect it next Monday on the show. Look forward to your call back. When's that going to be? Not tomorrow morning, the morning after for Kyrgios and Sinner. Well, after 5 decades involved in tennis as a player, coach and tennis administrator, my guest in the studio tonight has officially hung up the racket. He's retired. Chris Cotchell. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome into the studio. Hey, that's what he deserves. I was reading a LinkedIn post, and I reckon there's about 120 comments of love for you and your contribution to the game, and so many people said, you've got to get Chris on the show and get him in. It's great to see you. We've met before, but nice to recognise your great contribution you've made over a long time.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. It's been an incredible journey. Yeah, I was blown away by the responses from Australia and overseas. An incredible journey from a 15-year-old leaving Tamworth, moving to Sydney.
Yep.
50 years.
Incredible.
In the game.
So just to set it up for those that, of different generations who are tuning into our show, play professionally, singles, career high 73, doubles, career high 19, 3 career doubles titles, highest ranking, as I said there, 19, semi-final Australian Open and US Open. So your career panned out, was about 8 years, from about the early 70s through to about 1980.
73 through 80. So I played the circuit for 8 years. My first trip away was with Mark Edmondson. And in 76, he won the Australian Open. Yeah.
It was always the topic of a great trivia question.
Yes.
For a long time.
Yeah, very good.
Still is.
Still is. Still is.
So I've got to say, I mean, just when you think about your playing side, how do you sort of sum it up? I mean, there have been a couple of moments of pretty special moments I'm going to recall here with you. But when you think back to your playing days and the era that you played in and what tennis was like back then.
Yeah, look, I think it was probably one of the better eras to play in, and the camaraderie of the Australian players was fantastic. And I've got to give a shout out here to Ken Rosewell. He sort of moulded me as the player, as the person that I am today, my coaching philosophy. And it all went back to practicing with Ken, and it was like the words to the effect of training is like war, not against me, but against the ball. And if you don't put in, basically nick off. And as I said, that was something that has stayed with me right through playing, coaching. If you don't put in 100%, you actually regress. You go backwards. And like there weren't a lot of coaches around at the time. Obviously Borg had his coach, but the Australians we were pretty much on our own. So you had to fend for yourself. And I think that's where, in my mind, looking at the game from a tactical point of view, as a player, and then taking that through to a coach. So, but yeah, as I said, the camaraderie was sensational back then.
Now, I want to look at a man that you beat, and you beat him twice. The great Arthur Ashe, the stadium at the US Open named after the great Arthur Ashe. Of course, former world number one, 3-time major winner. So 1976, he was 12 in the world. That was the win you had in Sydney. And then 3 years later, you played him at Wimbledon, opening round of 1979, when he was 8 in the world. In fact, I think you'd met a week or two before at Queen's, where he had a comfortable victory, but you reversed it, Chris. But just take us through the memories of those 2 great wins against one of the icons of the sport.
Yeah, look, 76 in Sydney. I had to come through qualifying, so I think I won 2 or 3 matches to qualify, and then played Arthur first round. And I guess that's where the seeds are vulnerable first up. But a big shout out to the late Bob Carmichael, who, again, a great tactician, gave me a very simple game plan to play Arthur. I went out, I executed it unbelievably well, and got the match in straight sets. And then further down the track, 3 years later, I played him at Queen's, the lead-up tournament to Wimbledon in 79. Centre court there at Queen's, and I got absolutely flogged. So nothing worked, and then drew him for Wimbledon, so I thought, no, that's not great. But again, on the graveyard court, court number 2, I played as well as I could possibly play, and he was a little bit off, and I won in 3 straight sets. So, yeah, 2-1 against the great Arthur.
Can you remember what sort of the headlines were that day, or what was the sort of storyline around it?
It was sort of Bush Boy comes good. That was on a poster out of, I think, the Daily Telegraph in Sydney, one in the eye for Arthur.
Yep.
But again, you know, the highs and lows of tennis, I think I played equally as well next match, and I played a big Swedish guy called Ove Benson out on court 13, which the grass courts back then were a bit rough, so balls were bouncing everywhere. And I lost, I think it was 6-4 in the fifth after being down 2 sets to love. So the highs and lows, but knowing that I gave it my best shot, it come up a little bit short. Yeah.
So 1980, you're only
23. I retired at 23 after 8 years.
Give us the context around all that.
Yeah, look, as I said, when you think a country kid heading to Sydney, 8 years on tour, and I just felt the last couple of years I had a calling to go into coaching. Got married to the lovely Kay, and settled in Melbourne. Yeah.
Okay. So was that an era? I'm just trying to think back. I mean, obviously we, in hearing the news of Ash last week, we were trying to think back. Bjorn Borg retired. He was 26.
26, I think it was. Yeah.
There have been others on the women's side that have, come in so young and had, teen success, like Hingis and Capriati and others who have retired. And Hingis sort of came back and had a second career. But what was the sort of average longevity back then on the tour?
Look, in hindsight, I probably should have maybe stayed on and played doubles. But the prize money back then, it was nothing what it is today. I think, like first round at Wimbledon, I think was £100 back in the day. So that's not going to go too far.
And how many weeks were you away back then?
Well, one year, the Australian Open was played over Christmas in December, left in January, got back after the US Open, so back in, say, early September, a couple of weeks off, and then went on the Asian tour for another 4 or 5 weeks.
Yep. So
you could be anywhere up to nine months on the road, yeah.
If you've got a question tonight for Chris Cudgell, you can certainly call in 1300 736 736 as we reminisce on his 50 years in the game, which has come to a close. You had been working at TA. We'll certainly have a look at that a little bit later on. So you talk about the appetite for coaching. How did that then transition from playing to coaching, and how did you get the ball rolling with that?
Yeah, look, I came straight off the tour in 1980 and went into running my own tennis academy at Doncaster Tennis Club here in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and so I was there for 10 years. Now, when you look back on that, a lot of coaches these days, they just want to go straight to the top and work in high performance, but I looked at that as a great apprenticeship and learn the art of coaching at club level before you go into the next level. So, yeah, that was a great experience, coaching midweek ladies to the young, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds to pennant players, the full gamut, and the art of coaching, yeah.
And what was the initial philosophy that you brought in, and then how much has that sort of changed and evolved? I mean, coaches are always learning, aren't they, and always trying to keep up with modern trends, but also how every coach has their philosophy and some sound, some non-negotiables, if you like, of how the game should look and be played.
Yeah, interesting one. I guess my main philosophy was around the care factor. It didn't matter what standard they were, that you had something to offer that particular player, and trying to put a pathway in place that they could go down that pathway. So care factor was probably the number one in my philosophy, and as I said, looking after all the stakeholders involved.
Yep. What we'll do is take a break. We'll come back and continue the coaching discussion, and then into the admin part, of course, with TA down the track. Chris Cudgell, our special guest on the First Serve tonight. First Serve, Chris Cudgell, our special guest in the studio tonight. 50 years in tennis. He's been a player. We're going down the coaching path with him. He's also been in the coach ed space, that admin space with Tennis Australia. Paul Lakin, who you would know, Chris, a great friend of the program, has been a co-host on this show over the years. Amazing coach and incredible role model on the text. Please ask Chris what state-grade pennant meant to him.
That was incredible, state pennant. back in the 80s. It was super strong. There were a lot of players that just came off the tour. Paul was in our team at MCC. You know, we had great times through that, and it was a great learning curve for everyone. And it was a very, very strong competition.
Good on you, Paul. Thank you for that. We could probably talk about that for an hour and all the stories and the characters around it. So you've gone from being a player, retire in your mid-20s, to Doncaster Tennis Club for the best part of a decade, and then you found your way to the AIS. And back in that era, you were there for 12 years, 1990 to about 2002. The AIS was heaving, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was the place to be.
Well, what an honour to head up the top program in the country. Yeah, it was. The majority of sports were at the AIS in Canberra. It was a great facility. We had the indoor, outdoor courts, and I had a passion for the clay courts, and we put in two clay courts. And to have the best players come into a centralised program was something special. But having said that, as time went by, in 1996, so 6 years in, the program was relocated here to Melbourne. And the thinking behind that was, we're a Grand Slam nation. We probably should have our top tennis program at the home of tennis here in Melbourne. So that was a big move in '96. And one of the things that come into play there was I introduced homestay families.
Okay.
And then because of that, I was never big on athletes being in the dormitories.
Yep.
You know, it's a tough grind. And I'll never forget, Rob De Castella said to me, make sure you get it right because you'll only get one chance. And I think we got it right.
Yeah. So 12 years there, you won the Australia Sports Medal for service to sport, which you must have been pretty chuffed about.
Yeah, no, great honour. You don't go looking for that, but that was a nice honour to receive that, yeah.
Then a couple of years on the WTA tour. Can you recall
the
coaching journey there?
That was different. My first year was with Evie Dominikovic, and Evie had a career high of 55.
Yep.
So that was a great experience. And then the second year was with an American player, Jenny Hopkins, who's married to Taylor Dent.
Yes.
So, and Ray Ruffles was the instigator of piecing that all together. Yeah. But it was unfortunate with Jenny. She had a wrist injury which sort of curtailed everything. It made it very difficult to do a lot of things that you wanted to do, because she broke down at the French there one year and never really recovered from that. Yeah.
And then you had a stint in China, which some Australian coaches have gone and done. I remember speaking to Mark Elawadi in the studio a couple of years ago. Had a couple of years in China, which is an experience in itself from a lifestyle point of view.
Exactly. Yeah. No, well, I was a travelling coach, so they identified 9 athletes under Lee Na for the London Olympics, and I was working with 2 of those players. And as I said, it was in 6-week blocks, so I'd go do my 6 weeks, come back. But the first 6-week block was an interesting one, a training camp in Guangzhou, which really opened my eyes to the effort that they put in, and just 2 words that came out of that was all about footwork, dynamic and explosive. That's all they talked about. I had to write up a program for the 6 weeks for the 2 athletes. Do you think they used it? No. It was just hit tennis balls.
Yep. I mean, I imagine it's a bit like all sports. They're very drilled, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so. And in the end, again, with values and behaviours, it probably cost me my job. And I'll say to any coach out there, don't be afraid to lose your job. And one of the things they were big on, you do your training block, but then you go to the tournament, and it wouldn't matter whether it was 6-1, 6-2 or 7-5 in the third. They want to go out and hit for 2 or 3 hours. And I was never big on that. I was always, I'll identify a couple of things from the matches. We'll go and do 10 or 15 minutes, keep you fresh for whatever, going forward. Anyway, this particular player wasn't impressed with that. She won the tournament, went back to China, and I got the email, thanks very much.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd be a ruthless game at times.
Yeah. But again, you just put it down to experience, move on. There's no point worrying about it. Yeah.
So then you go and have a stint with the governing body here. So you've been external, you go internal into Tennis Australia. You've had a few different sort of portfolios.
Yeah.
Take us through the last sort of decade.
So the last 11 years at TA, with the redevelopment of Melbourne Park, one of my passions was clay courts. So when I was at the AS, I think it was about 1991, I bought the profile back from Roland Garros to build the clay court. So Craig Tiley knew that I had a passion for clay and how important it was for Australian tennis. So I started out as a consultant on the clay. I went around Australia to see what was available. And, one thing led to another. We put a research centre together at Macquarie University in Sydney. Had 5 different clay courts down up there that clients, coaches, etc., players could come and play, go from court to court. So that gave you a good feel of what was available. So that was the clay court, and in the end, the Italian clay won out. It's a great surface, and I think we got half the equation right in Australia now with the clay. But I still think we need to be in Europe a hell of a lot more. So that was half. The other half was the coach education component, where I was heavily involved with the high performance course as an assessor, helping out with the workshops, mentoring, site visits, the Next Gen program, same thing, and a lot of mentoring, and work with a great team with Belinda Colinari and Scotty Draper. You couldn't get a better team to work with. We bounced off each other beautifully.
Chris, I'd love more time. We're always hamstrung for time, but just to sum it up in a minute, I mean, just what tennis has meant to you and what it's given you the most.
Just a love of a sport, I guess. From day one, I remember I always wanted to play Wimbledon. I achieved that, and just the love of the sport. What a great sport to be involved in. Yeah, and to be able to play. I'm out there hitting with my grandson now. And it's just so good. You can play it at any age. Yeah.
And just a quick word on Ash Barty.
Yeah. Look, what a great role model. A fantastic tennis player. It's going to leave a huge gap. What you said in your intro, let's hope the door's not totally closed and she comes back further down the track. But yeah, no, a great role model, great person, great for tennis. Leaves a huge gap.
Thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. I just wanted to give people a snapshot of the contribution you've made across lots of different areas. You've played, you've coached, you've administrated, and I'm sure even though you can now sort of put the feet up, that the tennis will still run through the veins in some capacity. So job well done.
Thank you.
Chris Coachill joining us to reflect on his career. All thanks to Hume Tennis and Community Centre, a mini Melbourne park in Melbourne's north, which is tennis for everyone, perfect also for coaches and players. If you're coming from interstate to train and compete, it's close to Melbourne Airport, accommodation just around the corner. You can find out more at humetennis.com.au. All thanks to Yarra Tennis coaching our chat tonight at Eaglemont Tennis Club, just off the Eastern Freeway. Junior and adult programs available. Shane Scrutton, he's magnificent, Shane. 30 years coaching experience. His mission is simply to improve your game, whether you're a complete beginner or a serious player. Check out yarratennis.com.au. Make sure you go shopping at Tennis Direct right throughout the week. They'll look after you. Use that promo code FIRSTSERVE10. Get that nice little 10% discount. They are Australia's favourite online tennis store. So we are basically parked here for the next period of time, covering all the tournaments domestically. Canberra this week, Miami, of course, to continue. Nick Kyrgios, I think, is a chance the way he's actually playing this week. We know he's not going to play the clay court season, but he might have some real impact at Miami this week. Keep your correspondence coming through the first serve, sen@gmail.com, the longer form. Keep an eye on our socials, our website. Some great articles going up this week, and you can cover tennis 7 days a week. Talk to you next Monday.